In February 2022, the aviation world woke up to the sad news of the destruction of the only Antonov AN-225 in existence. Famously known as the Mriya, which is Ukrainian for the dream, this plane was one of the earliest victims of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The damage to this aircraft was so extensive that to many people, repairing it would be impossible. But just as many thought that this destruction had marked an end to one of the most iconic aircraft in the world, the Ukrainian government announced ambitious plans for a project that could see the Antonov AN-225 take to the skies once again, against all expectations. Could we be set to witness the most remarkable comeback in aviation history? Well, to understand why it might make an actual comeback, we need to go back to the origin, why it was developed. This takes us back to the 1980s, when the United States and the former Soviet Union were embroiled in a fierce show of might during the Cold War. As the two sides scrambled for superiority in space exploration, the Soviet Union set out to build a behemoth of an airplane that would help to transport Buran-class spaceplane orbiters, the Soviet equivalent of the United States Space Shuttle. That is how the AN-225 was born. The Soviet Union planned to transport the precious cargo riding piggyback on the AN-225. This aircraft was the heaviest aircraft ever built. To put this into perspective, think about the modern Airbus A380 or the Boeing 747 freighter. Now, the AN-225 was heavier and bigger than either of those. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the AN-225 would be mothballed before it was refurbished and returned to service as a civilian cargo transporter under the ownership of Antonov Airlines. The gentle giant would go on to conquer the air cargo transport niche for decades. The aircraft even held the record for carrying the heaviest payload in history, which weighed a whopping 253,820 kilograms. This record stands till date. Fast forward to 2022, and the Antonov suffered extensive damage after the Russian forces attacked Hostomel Airfield, where the aircraft had been parked undergoing heavy maintenance. Aside from being a joy to watch among aviation enthusiasts, the Antonov 225 was also a symbol of pride among the Ukrainian people. There were questions as to whether this aircraft could be repaired and taken back to service. However, as more photos and videos surfaced, this hope gradually dwindled. However, in May 2022, the Ukrainian government, led by President Volodymyr Zelensky, made the announcement that everyone had been yearning for: the Antonov AN-225 Mriya would be returned to service. However, many people wondered how this would be possible, considering that photos and videos showed that the entire front section of the aircraft and the right wing had been beyond salvage. Wouldn't the cost of repairing this aircraft be astronomical? The thing is, when the first AN-225 was made and proved to be a success, the Soviet Union went on to make an order for 3 more of these aircraft. However, as fate would have it, the Soviet Union collapsed as the second aircraft was on the works. It is during this period that the plane manufacturer, Antonov, was transitioning from communism to capitalism. This also meant that the Soviet funding that was keeping the Antonov megaplane project alive would eventually be cut off, leaving the entire project in limbo. By the time work on the second plane was coming to a complete halt in 2009, the plane was about 70% complete. This brings us back to the announcement by the Ukrainian authorities to bring back the legendary aircraft. The announcement on bringing back the aircraft was in reference to the second plane that was abandoned before completion. Speaking about these plans, President Zelensky said that apart from replacing the aircraft that had been destroyed, the second AN-225 would also be a form of tribute to every Ukrainian pilot that had been killed during the war. He stated how many pilots gave their lives to bring everything there, from weapons to water, and how many wounded they took from there. A large number of these people died heroically. To build a Mriya for the sake of the memory of heroes is the right state position. According to reports, rebuilding the second AN-225 would cost somewhere between $500 million and $3 billion. So would it be economically feasible for the Ukrainian government to spend such an amount of money on a Soviet-era aircraft? To answer that question, we need to look at the pros as well as the cons of this plan. For starters, one factor favoring this plan is the fact that the second plane is about 70% complete and is still stored in a good condition in Ukraine. To add on to that, in November 2022, Antonov confirmed that it had 30% of the parts that would be required to complete the behemoth. Also, the AN-225 shares a number of components with its smaller sibling, the AN-124, implying that Antonov could already be in possession of more of these needed components. Sadly, that would be the only point that supports rebuilding the AN-225. On the other hand, spending such a colossal amount of money in rebuilding a fairly outdated airplane would not make much financial sense at this moment. To help put this to scale, the cost of developing the Boeing 747 is estimated to have been around $1 billion, including the development of a brand new factory. Further, owing to more significant challenges that the war-torn Ukraine is facing at the moment, committing such an amount on rebuilding an aircraft with limited usage could prove to be detrimental in the long term. Another challenge that stands in the way of bringing the AN-225 back to life is the lack of specialized facilities to enable works on the aircraft. The thing is, once the Soviet Union collapsed and it became clear that the government no longer needed this aircraft, these facilities closed their doors and have not been operational for about 3 decades. The state factories that produced parts for the aircraft also went idle. This means that it would be almost impossible to get critical parts such as the electrical systems and the hydraulic systems. Even in the event that these factories were still operational, some of them are located in Russia. This means that it would be impossible for Antonov to negotiate with a sworn enemy for the supply of the much-needed parts to rebuild the aircraft. Assembling the team to work on the second AN-225 could also prove to be a daunting task, considering that almost every engineer, designer, factory worker, and other workers involved in the development of the first aircraft are either retired or deceased. To add to the complexity, the specifications of the second AN-225 were slightly different from the first one. For instance, it has a rear cargo door and a redesigned tail with a vertical stabilizer. This makes it potentially impossible to reuse certain parts that could be salvaged from the first AN-225 on this second aircraft. In case Antonov chooses to use new parts on the second aircraft, this will only add to the cost and might even require the aircraft to undergo a fresh certification process. Now, the AN-225 was powered by a total of 6 Ivchenko Progress D18PT turbofan engines. It is safe to say that these power plants are not anywhere near efficient, considering that they were developed in the mid-1970s. This means that Antonov could be forced to look at other power plant options for the new aircraft to ensure that it complies with the modern sustainability rules and regulations. All these activities would surely increase the costs incurred in the process of making the AN-225 take to the skies once again. So how would Ukraine go about actualizing the dream of rebuilding the AN-225? At the moment, funding the project internally would not be feasible. This points us toward the external investments route. Ukraine, through Antonov Airlines, could look to woo potential investors that might be interested to invest in this program. Actually, there have been reports that a few investors have shown interest in investing in the program. One such investor is Virgin Group's Sir Richard Branson, who showed interest in the project after visiting the airport where the AN-225 was destroyed. However, he has yet to fully commit to the program. Antonov Airlines has also welcomed well-wishers that might want to be part of the reconstruction program to donate funds. The company hopes that the global aeronautic community can join hands and contribute toward achieving the dream of seeing this beautiful bird flying again in all its majesty. Corporate giants have also pledged to support the reconstruction process. For instance, Microsoft added the aircraft to its flight simulator game and announced that all proceeds from the download of that aircraft in the game would be donated to the cargo company to help in the rebuilding efforts. As we had mentioned before, Antonov could find it challenging to source some parts and components for the new AN-225. With that, the company might also have to liaise with the likes of Boeing, Airbus, and Mriya to see how they can make new parts and components specifically for the aircraft. In fact, it seems that the company could have explored this possibility. This is after the AN-225's chief pilot, Dmitry Antonov, was quoted saying, "We are still in contact with manufacturers such as Boeing, Airbus, and Mriya to ask them to help us rebuild Mriya." If successful, this collaboration between competitors for a shared goal could symbolize a powerful moment of unity in the aviation industry, demonstrating that even in a highly competitive market, some icons such as the AN-225 are worth preserving. Nonetheless, the decision to rebuild the Antonov AN-225 could ultimately depend on the sentimental value that it holds among the Ukrainian people. Seeing it fly once again could be the fuel that the country needs to fight for its sovereignty against external aggression. For Ukraine, the dream might have burned down, but it did not die. And it might just be a matter of time before that dream is reactualized. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.